thank you to all of my wonderful, wonderful patrons. What up, nerds? Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative. My name is Leslie Smith, and today on the channel, I'm going to talk about all of the things that I have been reading over the past week, starting with what I finished. So for those of you who've been around for a while, I am rereading One Piece. Well, the first 90 volumes are going to be a reread. After that, I'll be getting into new territory. So this week's volumes, I went through 6, 7, and 8. I really started this intending to read one chapter each morning with my morning coffee, and I can never stop after just one chapter. A lot of times I'll read half a volume or even a whole volume, but I am going to stop after volume 9. I'm waiting on a discussion that I'm going to be a part of in February with John over at Talking Story. I believe Dr. Philip Chase is going to be there as well, along with a few other special guests. As soon as I have the date for that, I will go ahead and start linking it in the description. So if you're a One Piece fan, I know you're going to want to watch that, because if you watch this channel regularly, you will love the Talking Story channel. So go ahead and check them out. I just cannot wait to hear about John's experience with this wonderful, wonderful, very beloved manga. I also finished Unanimous. Unanimity. I finished this one. This is the first book in Alexandra Almeida's Spiral Worlds series. I believe each book is going to cover one day. There are 2 books out in this series so far. This one and the second one, I believe, is called Parody, I think is how you pronounce that title. I am just really terrible with these titles. I've been trying to practice, y'all, but I just can't even say this one unless I say Unanimous first. This one, okay. Remember how I've been bellyaching that I wanted to read about a human experience into the digital world that was created by Harry and Tom? This world was created, it's a virtual reality simulation that has artificial intelligence involved that basically data mines your social media. When you go into the down below, you are experiencing a story in which you are able to take part in living out some of your darkest urges. And the idea is the artificial intelligence nudges you to make better choices, to make you want to be a better person, so that when you return to real life on Earth, you start to enable change. You probably figured out why I wanted to read it. This AI, Sybil, is also constantly learning and evolving, and that's what I really wanted to read about when I first started it. But when I started hearing about this down below, the digital realm, I wanted to learn about that. But I wanted to read about some experiences, how this actually worked. I finally got a couple of those. I really wish more time in development had been spent with those, especially since this book is just one day. It's the first day where one of the creators of the Down Below, Tom, is resurrected. His digital twin, known as Shadow, has been resurrected in order to fix something that has happened with the storytelling of these worlds. I do feel like this one ended on a high note. I think it is a good start to what is possibly going to be a really great futuristic science fiction series. It has a lot of good things about it. There are a couple of things that I did not particularly enjoy. There's a lot of social commentary, and I get it. It's needed. It's the whole premise of why Harry and Tom created the Down Below. Unfortunately, I feel it's one-sided. There was not enough intelligent debate from both sides, so it feels biased. So I don't enjoy that. If you're going to use a novel to express what you would like to see changed in the world, give me both sides of the story and do each side justice. I don't like that freedom of choice is made to look like right and wrong. Now, I'm not saying this book was out of control in that regard, not at all. But both sides, I feel, were not accurately portrayed. And then there's a pet peeve of mine that y'all have heard me talk about this before on the channel if you've been around for a while. I don't like when an author chooses to show a character's accent phonetically. There is a character, Harry, who when he gets very emotionally charged, his New York accent becomes very pronounced. And she notates this. That was all you needed to do. As a reader, I'm going to apply that accent myself as I'm reading his dialogue. But she would type it out, like he would say, I'm sorry. And she would type it out, Sahry. And my brain's going, oh, that is a really bad typo. And then every time this would happen, it would just, my brain would screech to a halt, and it was just nails on the chalkboard. But that's just a personal pet peeve of mine. If that's not something that bothers you, you won't have an issue with that at all. So I do feel like it was a good start to a potentially great science fiction fantasy series. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, absolutely give that one a try. Now, I will say that the main reason I picked it up is because the author told me, hey, I saw your video about how much you love reading about artificial intelligence. That's why I picked it up. I did become more interested in the idea behind the down below. But when we circle back around to the reason why I picked it up, the AI didn't play as big of a role in the story as I wanted. I do think that's going to change. There were a few breadcrumbs sprinkled throughout the narrative that led me to believe this AI is still evolving and may evolve in a non-typical way, at least according to all of the AI books I've read. But of course, those have leaned more into the horror side of things than otherwise. And for the last book that I finished reading this week, I finally finished Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson and gave it a whopping 2-star rating. There wasn't even a Sanderlanche in this one. There was a mini Sanderlanche I was actually excited about. I'm like, okay, we're about to have a moment here. And then he promptly not only ruined a potentially great moment, one of the only great, probably the only great moment this one would have had. It also ruined the character for me, and it was out of character. There was so much of that in this book. So many of these characters acted out of character. So much of the progress that we read about these characters in the past 4 books, they really were put through it. Some of them experienced some really traumatic things. They worked through it. They were getting stronger. They did some amazing things to overcome things that happened in their lives. And then in this book, well, first of all, we repeat a lot of the last 4 books through visions and just remembrances of past events. And I'm going, why did you go and undo all of the work these people have put in bettering themselves and their mental health? Why did you undo all of that to do this big fat mental health case study, which was just unnecessary and a huge, huge waste of time? I am so filled with regret that I did not DNF this book. I don't know that I'm going to be able to make a return to Sanderson. This book was so bad for me and what I enjoy reading about that I do not trust this author going forward. Because if this, his latest book, is an indicator of the direction he's going to go forward, I don't want any part of it. It's just like Stephen King. Love classic Stephen King. His stuff that's coming out now, the last 3 books that I've gotten by him, because he was an autobi author, have all been terribly disappointing to me. And after doing 3 or 4 books that way, I'm like, okay, this is what he's going to do with his writing going forward. I don't want a part of it. I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to spend my money on it. And in the case of Brandon Sanderson, I'm pretty sure I'm just going to get rid of all the stuff of his that I have except for Warbreaker. That is still my favorite novel by Brandon Sanderson. Actually, other than Warbreaker, Stormlight were the only books I've read of his that I actually really loved. In my opinion, Mistborn Era 1, the 3rd book, ruined that series for me. It's not one I would ever consider rereading because that 3rd book was just that terrible. So that's okay. There are still millions of people out there that love Sanderson. There are so many people that have a completely different experience of Wind and Truth, and I'm happy for them. I'm so glad that other people read 1,400 pages and still enjoyed the book. I just am not one of them, and that's okay. Like, disclaimer, this channel, I am not an objective book reviewer. In fact, I mean, everybody who reads a book that writes a review is a reviewer. I'm just out here sharing my personal experience with a book. So please always Follow your gut. If it's a book you read the back of and you're like, man, I really want to read that, and then you hear me say, oh my Lord, I did not like it, I'm never going to read that author again, just let that temper your expectations. Maybe borrow it from the library before you spend money on it to make sure, but don't let it discourage you from reading it. There was something about that book, that description, that made you want to read it. Do it. Absolutely do it. Just maybe keep your expectations low and you'll have a much better experience with the book than I did. Enough of all of that. Let's get into what am I currently reading. Well, your girl really screwed up. I have 4 books going right now. I am loving all 4 pretty equally, and they're all different books. So I am working on One Piece Volume 9. I'm probably going to go ahead and just knock this one out in the morning and get that one finished. And I'm going to put a halt on the reread until after the live show that I'm going to be a part of the discussion. That way I don't get mixed up and talk about things that haven't happened yet. Okay, so that one's good. Now, I've started my next review read, which is Credible Threats by Daniel Meyer. Okay, so I knew I was going to like this one. When the author reached out to me with a synopsis for this one and offered a copy for review, what he said was, I think you'll like this one since you're a Dresden fan. And he was right. I started this one this morning. I was just going to read a chapter. I read 56 pages and I really didn't want to stop to actually film this video. I wanted to keep going, which is a problem because I'm also reading The Curse of the Mistwraith by Jenny Wirtz, which is phenomenal. And I'm about halfway through the audiobook for Onyx Storm. I had to do the audiobook because my special edition copy that I ordered from Books A Million hasn't made it in yet. I'm having a great time with all of them. What I love about this one, this author really did his homework when looking for reviewers to read this book. So many times I feel that self-published authors look at subscribers or the follower count for book reviewers, and they're just trying to get their books into the hands of these people with big followings instead of watching a few videos, maybe going and looking at their Goodreads and seeing how they rate authors who write in the similar vein, which is exactly what Daniel Meyer did. He looked and saw, okay, this girl has read the Dresden Files 5 times. She's rated them all mostly 4 and 5 stars. We won't talk about Battleground. She's probably going to really enjoy this book. And my goodness. So it's an urban fantasy. It's about 16-year-old Sam Adams, who's a wizard. Now, for those of you who are Dresden fans like me, we've heard about Harry's teenage years when he came into his power, but we've never gotten to live through it. That is kind of what I'm getting from this one. Sam, I haven't gotten really far into learning about how he came into his power, but it does feel very new. He's still learning the ropes. He's still learning how much he can wield, what he can do, the spells, the type of things he is able to take on. I love that. I love that he's 16. What happens in a 16-year-old boy? The hormones are wild. On page 1, I knew I was in love because what is he doing? He's going to banish a poltergeist from the home of one of his classmates. And he's going, okay, I haven't done this before, and I'm fairly sure I know how to tackle this. Next, he has a familiar, a cat named Catrick Swayze. Brilliant. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a fun book. One thing that I've read so far Daniel Meyer has done new is that there are different types of wizards. Sam is a wizard that is known as an outlaw. He derives his power directly from the other side of the curtain. A lot of wizards are getting their power from another source. There's a middleman. They have to basically work for another type of being or entity, and in return, that entity or being supplies them with power. So Sam gets his directly from the other side. There's no middleman. And there's also this interesting bit of backstory to do with Sam's emotional well-being. He lost a classmate right before school let out the previous year due to an overdose. And I'm guessing this was one he had a crush on. It still affected him pretty adversely. And I love his sense of humor. I don't think it's come fully out of him yet because, like I said, he's dealing with the loss of his friend. He's still struggling with that. But I'm having the best time, and it's making it hard to decide what book I'm going to pick up when I sit down to read. So I already mentioned that I'm still working my way through The Curse of the Misra by Janie Wirtz. I am about 30% of the way through, and I think I finally landed on a word to describe Janie Wirtz's writing: meaningful. It's written so intentionally, and I don't want to give you the wrong idea. It's not complex. You don't have to be super smart to understand it, but no word is wasted when describing things. And it's also really pretty. I find it attractive the way that it's written. There have been several words that I haven't read in many, many years. I know what they mean. I just haven't seen them because I guess I've been reading a lot of modern fantasy lately. So it's nice to go back to some of the lesser used words in fantasy now. I don't know. Maybe it's just my age talking. I'm just happy to be back in the type of fantasy that first drew me in when I was a little baby teenager back in the early 90s. Just really enjoying this one. I am loving the characters. I think the characters are my favorite thing. Well, no, I'm going to say Janie Wirtz's writing style is my favorite thing. That's what I keep gushing over to myself as I'm reading it. I will reread a whole paragraph or a line because it's just worded so well. I'm nerding out over it. The second thing is going to be the characters. Now, so far, I feel it's been pretty one-sided. It was mostly, so the story's about half-brothers, Arathon Cephalon and Lysander Seleucid. So Arathon has been getting the majority of the character development and growth, just digging into him as a person, learning about him, how he was raised. So much has been kept from him. And now there's been a turn of events where I think it's going to balance out and give us some of Lysaeur's character growth and development. But there's also several side characters that have small excerpts that clue the reader in on other things that are happening in Aethera that I think is gonna all collect up into something greater. If you've read the Malazan series by Stephen Erickson, I think you would really enjoy Janie Wirtz, especially this series. Now, I've only read the Wars of Light and Shadow series so far with her. I have other things by her that I'm definitely going to prioritize when I finish this series. But all of the clues are pointing to the scope of this series is going to be really huge. I don't know what I think is going to happen, but I don't think the prophecy that has put all of this into motion, I don't think it's going to go the way that everyone is hoping. Now, I hope it does, but then again, I hope it doesn't, because my gosh, I can just imagine what would happen in that event. But there was this prophecy that there was going to be this royal heir born, and this person was going to be able to banish the curse of the misra. In Aethera, this misra cursed them so that it's mist. There's no sun. It's horrible. Obviously, without sunlight, they can't grow crops. It's hard to eke out a living in this world. Unfortunately, these half-brothers possess the opposing sides of the power needed, so we need them to work together in order to banish this misra. But you know how it is when you're working with family, and they're half-brothers, and they were also part of families that had a 7-generation blood feud. I can't wait to find out what's going to happen. Now, my other dilemma that I'm reading is Onyx Storm. It's the third book in the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. Holy smokes, this book is amazing. It is so much better. I'm going to say it's the best book of the 3 books so far, but you have to read the first one for the third one to make sense. But this one absolutely blows the second one out of the water. There is no time for breathing. It's just action, action, action. All of the things that were so great about the first book with just the constant death looming on every page. Oh my goodness, it's very exciting. I am absolutely loving it. It's a fantasy romance for those of you who don't know. So it's not usually one people pick up to read the plot for. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, it does have a great plot, but there is definitely some spice. I'm gonna say this one's probably gonna be a spice rating of 3, but I'm halfway done. It might be a 4. There's a lot going on and I'm living for it. I can't say why either because it'll give it away, so I'm not gonna say why. Usually this is where I slide into the TBR portion of the video where I talk about what I'm gonna read next. I am in the middle or the very beginning, in the case of Credible Threats, of some big books. I'm not quite sure how long Onyx Storm is, but I'm only halfway done. I'm not even halfway through Curse of the Misra, and I've just started Credible Threats. So I'm just gonna focus on these 3 books, and then of course finishing One Piece. That, I believe, is going to keep me fully occupied for the week. In the event that I do finish 1 or 2 or all of these before I talk to y'all next week, I'll probably slide into Herod the Great by Zora Neale Hurston. But then again, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. I am loving everything I'm reading right now, so I really want to focus on those and get some of those done because I don't know what made me think, oh, let me just keep starting these new books on top of each other, and then they're all so doggone good that I'm almost paralyzed with indecision when I sit down to read because I'm looking at the stack and I'm like, holy crap, I want to know what's going to happen next in all of them. What do I do? Oh, well, let me just fire up a video game. No, I'm just kidding. I do make a choice. This week was mainly focused on reading. Didn't really get up to much outside of that. Well, I play a lot of Overwatch 2. I play like 2 hours of video games every night. And then we started a new TV show. I bet a lot of you have watched it already. 11/22/63, a series adapted from Stephen King's novel of the same title about the JFK assassination. What happened if that assassination was prevented? And Stephen King explores this idea by creating a portal. It's a time travel portal in which our main character, played by James Franco, who I think is also the executive producer of the show, goes back into time to do just that. Now, it's not as easy as just saying, oh, I'm going to go to the grassy knoll and prevent Lee Harvey Oswald from taking the shot. First, we need to make sure that is who actually killed JFK, because why go through all this trouble only to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and the president still end up dead? Like, what would happen in that regard? So that's actually a really good show. I have not read the book first. I prefer to watch the TV adaptation before books because I am such a book snob. If I read the book first, I am almost never happy with the adaptation. I just sit there the whole time grumbling and basically ruin the experience for my husband. So he found this one and we've been watching that one. And then I think I might have him convinced to try the Mr. Mercedes series after this one because he's loving it so much. And I'm like, bro, you had no idea Stephen King wrote such fantastic crime thrillers now, did you? All right, I'm going to keep going. Y'all, thank you so much for watching today, stopping in, seeing what's going on in my little corner of BookTube. I'm just over here living the dream. Bookworm with 4 books going, loving them all. I hope that something that I talked about today sparked your fancy and you're going to go check it out in more detail and maybe add it to your TBR. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your weekend. For whichever one of you up north left your back door open so all this cold air came trickling down here to Florida, I'm going to need you to close it. It is cold. My gosh. My feet and my hands have not been warm in like 4 days. Give me my sun and my 80-degree weather back. Y'all take care. I'll catch you in the next one. Huge thank you goes out to all of the patrons that support the Nerdy Narrative, with a special shout out to the Nerds Radiant. Ev, Kate, Anne, Andrew, Amanda, Star, Gail, John, Chad, Wilbur, Tara, and Heidi.